5 years passed like water flowing through fingers. Taman was now 78 years old, moving slower than before but healthier than he had been in decades. The ranch that had once been a lonely place of quiet grief had transformed into something he never imagined possible. The original barn was now just one building in a sprawling cooperative. New structures had been added over the years, each one built with a mix of human and Valerian design. There were greenhouses where Soman and Minji grew hybrid crops that fed 3 settlements. There was a workshop where Hana trained young engineers, both human and alien. There was a school where Bora taught 47 children from 6 different species. There was a medical clinic where Yuna and 2 human doctors treated hundreds of patients every month. The Valerians were no longer refugees. They were citizens of New Terra, fully legal and fully integrated. They had work permits, property rights, and respect throughout the frontier. The pilot program that started with 11 women on one ranch had expanded to thousands of refugees across dozens of worlds. But success brought new challenges and new questions. Questions that Taman had been avoiding but could no longer ignore. It started with a message that arrived one morning. Soman received it first, and her reaction told Taman everything. She stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at her datapad with tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" Taman asked, worried. "The Valerian homeworld," Soman whispered. "They are rebuilding it. The war is over. They are calling for all refugees to return home and help with reconstruction." The news spread through the cooperative within hours. Every Valerian received the same message. The homeworld they thought was destroyed forever was being rebuilt. Their government wanted them back. Needed them back. That night, the house was quieter than it had been in years. The 11 women who had become Taman's family sat together, each one lost in thought. For 5 years, they had built a life on New Terra. They had friends, jobs, purpose, but the homeworld was calling them. Taman watched them struggle with the decision and felt his own heart breaking. He had known this day might come. He just hoped it would be later. Or never. "You should go," he said finally. "If your world needs you, you should go home." "This is our home now," Nari said, but her voice was uncertain. "You can have more than one home," Taman replied. He thought of his wife and daughter buried in the red soil of New Terra. Home is not just a place. It is the people you love and the memories you carry. If you go back to your homeworld, you will take this place with you in your hearts. And if you stay here, your homeworld will always be part of you. Over the next few weeks, each woman wrestled with her choice. Taman did not pressure them. He simply listened when they needed to talk and gave them space when they needed silence. Soman was the first to decide. She came to Taman one evening while he was feeding the thorn beasts. "I'm going back," she said. "My skills are needed there. The soil is poisoned from the war. Millions are starving. I can help save lives." "Then you must go," Taman said, even though it hurt to say it. "But I will return." Somin added quickly, "This is my home too. I will go for 2 years, help establish new agriculture, then come back. If you will have me. There will always be a place for you here," Taman promised. Minji and Yunji made the same choice. They would return to help rebuild, then come back to New Terra. Their skills were desperately needed on the homeworld, but their hearts were here. Hana, Suji, Gina, and Nari chose to stay. They had built lives on New Terra that they were not ready to leave. Hana was engaged to a human engineer. Suji had opened a restaurant in the settlement. Gina's art was famous across the frontier. Nari was developing new technology that combined human and Valerian innovations. Yuna chose both. She would split her time between the 2 worlds, establishing medical exchange programs. 6 months here, 6 months there. She was needed in both places. Hayori, the trader, would travel between worlds regularly, creating trade routes and maintaining connections. Bora's choice surprised everyone. She was staying on New Terra because she was married now, married to Donghae, the gruff rancher who had supported them from the beginning. They had fallen in love slowly over the years, and now they had a family together. 2 adopted children, 1 human and 1 Valerian orphan. "Love is strange," Donghae said, embarrassed when people asked about it. Did not plan on falling for an alien. But here we are. Young Daesam had perhaps the hardest choice. She was now in her early 20s and had been accepted to a prestigious university on one of the core worlds. She could study advanced physics and have opportunities that were impossible on a frontier planet. But that meant leaving Taman. Taman found her crying on the porch one night. "I do not know what to do. she sobbed. "You are like a grandfather to me. You took us in when no one else would." "How can I leave you?" Taman sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "I am an old man. I have lived my life. You are young and brilliant. You have a whole future ahead of you. If you stay here because you feel obligated to me, I will be angry. You understand?" "But I will miss you," Dasum said. "I will miss you too. But missing someone is the price we pay for loving them. And it is a price worth paying." He wiped her tears. "My daughter Nari wanted to be a doctor. She never got the chance. You have a chance to be a physicist. Take it. Live the life she could not. That would honor me more than staying here." Dasum left for university the next month. Before she went, Taman gave her a small wooden box. "This was Nari's," he said. "She would want you to have it." Inside was a simple necklace with a star pendant. Dasum wore it every day. As the departure date approached for those who were leaving, the cooperative organized a massive farewell gathering. Hundreds of people came, humans and aliens from all over the frontier. They celebrated everything the Valerians had accomplished and everything they would do in the future. Taman stood on his porch and watched the crowd. 5 years ago, he had been alone, waiting to die in the same quiet way he had lived. Now he was surrounded by family, biological and chosen. He had 11 daughters, even if some of them would be far away. Salman found him there. "You changed our lives," she said. "You gave us hope when we had none." "You changed mine too," Taman replied. "You reminded me that life is not over until it is over. That there is always room for more love, more family, more purpose." The night before the departures, Taman could not sleep. He walked through the ranch in the darkness, visiting all the places that had become meaningful over the years. The barn where 11 frightened refugees had first slept, the field where Soman had planted the first hybrid crops, the workshop where Hana had rebuilt her first machine, the school where Bora had taught her first lesson. He stopped at the small garden where he had planted a valerian tree. The women had given it to him on the first anniversary of their arrival. It glowed softly in the night, its bioluminescent leaves creating patterns of light and shadow. Taman touched the tree's bark and made a promise. "I will keep this place alive," he whispered. "For all of you, for as long as I can." The tree seemed to glow brighter as if it understood. The 3 days of waiting were torture. Taman tried to keep busy with ranch work, but his mind was always on the hearing. The Valerians were quiet, preparing themselves for the worst. They packed their few belongings and wrote farewell messages to the settlers who had been kind to them. On the second night, Taman could not eat. His chest felt tight and his left arm ached. He told himself it was just stress. He was 73 years old and had been under more pressure in the past week than in the previous 15 years combined. Of course, his body was complaining. The morning of the third day, Governor Kwan's office sent a message. She would announce her decision at noon in the settlement square. It would be a public announcement. That worried Taman. Public announcements were usually bad news. Good news came quietly. Taman and the 11 Valerians drove to the settlement together. Donghae and the other ranchers were already there. So were many of the settlers. News had spread across the frontier. This decision would affect every refugee worker on every frontier world. The crowd was larger than Taman had ever seen. Governor Kwan stood on the steps of the administrative building. She had a data pad in her hand and a microphone that barely worked. 2 immigration officials stood behind her, their faces unreadable. "I have reviewed the case of Taman Park and the 11 Valerian refugees," Governor Kwan began. Her voice echoed across the square. "I have also reviewed similar cases throughout this region. The question before me is not simple. It involves law, economics, and morality." Taman's chest tightened further. The pain in his arm was getting worse. He tried to breathe deeply, but it felt like something was sitting on his chest. "The law is clear," Governor Kwan continued. "All refugees must be processed through official channels. They must be documented, screened, and assigned to appropriate facilities. However, the law was written for a different time. It did not anticipate the current refugee crisis. It did not anticipate frontier worlds that desperately need skilled workers." Taman felt sweat on his forehead. The pain was spreading to his jaw now. He gripped the railing in front of him, trying to stay focused on the governor's words. "After careful consideration, I have decided to recommend a new pilot program to the Frontier Council. This program would allow frontier property owners to sponsor refugees as workers, provided they meet strict criteria. The refugees would be granted temporary work permits while their full immigration status is processed. This would be monitored closely to prevent abuse. A murmur went through the crowd. Was this good news or bad news? No one could tell yet. In the case of Taman Park and his 11 Valerian workers, Governor Kwan said, looking directly at Taman, "I am approving their application as the first test case of this program. They will receive 6-month work permits renewable based on performance and—" Taman did not hear the rest. The pain in his chest exploded. His vision went dark around the edges. He tried to say something, but no words came out. His knees buckled. He was aware of falling, of someone screaming, of hands catching him before he hit the ground. Then everything went black. When Taman woke up, he was lying on something soft. He could hear voices speaking urgently. The pain in his chest had changed from sharp to dull and heavy. He tried to open his eyes. "Do not move," Yuna's voice said above him. "You have had a heart attack. We are stabilizing you." Taman managed to open his eyes. He was on a medical table in what looked like the settlement's clinic. Yuna was on one side of him and a human doctor was on the other. But there were also other Valarians in the room. Yunji was monitoring something on a screen. Nari was adjusting equipment. Hana had apparently rebuilt some medical device in the last few minutes because she was covered in grease. "His heart rhythm is stabilizing," the human doctor said, sounding amazed. "Whatever you are doing, it is working." Yuna's hands were on Taman's chest, glowing with that same warm light he had seen before. But now there were 3 other Valerians with their hands on him too, all of them glowing. Their combined electromagnetic fields were somehow supporting his failing heart. "We can keep him stable," Yuna said, "but he needs proper treatment. His arteries are blocked. He needs surgery or he will have another attack." "Surgery would take weeks to arrange," the human doctor said. "We would have to transport him to the nearest major medical facility. He might not survive the journey." "Then we do it here," Yuna said firmly. "I have performed cardiac procedures before. With the right equipment, I can build what you need," Hana interrupted. "Tell me what you require." Over the next 6 hours, Taman drifted in and out of consciousness. He was aware of activity around him, of Hana welding and building, of Yuna studying medical files on a datapad, of Soman's face above his telling him to hold on, of Dasam crying in the corner while Yunji comforted her. The surgery happened in the settlement clinic. It was not a proper hospital, but Yuna made it work. With equipment that Hana built from spare parts and medical supplies rushed in from neighboring settlements. She performed a procedure that would have been routine in a major city, but was nearly impossible on a frontier world. The other Valerians assisted. Even those with no medical training helped where they could. Soman monitored his vital signs. Yunji managed the anesthesia. Nari controlled the improvised surgical robots that Hana had built. It was a team effort across disciplines, all of them working desperately to save one stubborn old rancher. The surgery took 4 hours. When it was over, Yuna was exhausted but smiling. "He will live," she announced. The news spread through the settlement like wildfire. The old human who had taken in 11 alien refugees had been saved by those same refugees using a combination of human and Valerian medicine. Cameras had been recording the whole thing because Governor Kwan had ordered documentation of the new pilot program. By the time Taman woke up the next day, the video had spread across the entire frontier. Millions of people had watched the Valerian women work together to save a human life. They had seen the desperation on their faces, the skill in their hands, the determination to not let him die. Public opinion shifted overnight. Suddenly, refugees were not just a burden or a security risk. They were people with valuable skills and deep compassion. They were neighbors worth keeping. When Taman finally opened his eyes and saw all 11 Valerians sitting around his bed, he tried to speak. "You were supposed to let me take care of you," he whispered. His voice was rough from the breathing tube. "Family takes care of each other," Soman said gently. "You taught us that." Taman's eyes filled with tears. He had not cried since his wife and daughter died, but now the tears came freely. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved us first," Yuna replied. "We are even now." Governor Kwan visited the next day. She stood at the foot of his bed with her datapad. "The Frontier Council has approved the pilot program," she said. "Your case has become the model for refugee integration across all frontier worlds. Congratulations, Mr. Park. You have changed history." Taman looked at the 11 women who had become his family. We all did, he said. Taman spent the next morning researching frontier labor laws on his old computer. The screen flickered and the internet connection was slow, but he read everything he could find. There were loopholes, small ones. Frontier worlds needed workers, and the law allowed property owners to hire non-citizens if they could prove the work was necessary, and no humans were available for the jobs. The problem was documentation. He needed contracts, work permits, proof of employment, and financial records showing he could afford to pay them. Taman had maybe 3,000 credits in his account. That would not convince anyone. While he was reading, Hannah appeared at his door. "I fixed your solar panels," she said. They were only running at 40% efficiency. Now they are at 95%. "You will save money on power," Taman blinked. He had not asked her to do that. She just saw a problem and fixed it. "Thank you," he said. "It is what I do," Hannah replied simply. "I see broken things and I make them work again." An idea began to form in Taman's mind. These women were not just refugees. They were skilled professionals. Scientists, engineers, medics, teachers. If he could prove their value to the settlement, maybe he could argue for their right to stay. He called a meeting that evening. All 11 Valerians sat in his living room looking worried. "I need to know exactly what each of you can do," Taman said. "Every skill, every bit of knowledge. If we are going to convince the authorities you are essential workers, I need to know what makes you essential." They went around the room. Soman could analyze soil composition and design sustainable farming systems. Minji knew how to create hybrid crops that could survive in harsh environments. Hana could repair almost any machine. Yuna had advanced medical training. Bora could teach everything from basic reading to advanced science. Suji knew food preservation techniques that could extend the life of crops. Hayori, the trader, understood economics and supply chains. Nari could repair and improve technology. Gina's art could be sold. Yunji had counseling skills that frontier settlements desperately needed. Even young Dasam had value. She was brilliant with mathematics and could help with agricultural calculations. "This ranch was failing before you arrived," Taman said slowly. "In 1 week you have made it profitable again. If I can show that to the authorities, if I can prove you are not taking jobs from humans but creating value that was not there before, maybe we have a chance." "But the money," Somin said. "You cannot afford to pay all of us legal wages." "Then we become partners," Taman said. "A cooperative. You work the ranch, I provide the land and equipment. We split any profits. It is legal under frontier law." The Valerians looked at each other. Hope was a dangerous thing for refugees, but it was flickering in their eyes. Over the next 3 days they worked like never before. The fields exploded with growth under Soman and Minji's care. Hana repaired every piece of equipment on the ranch and improved most of them. Bora contacted the settlement and offered free tutoring sessions, and within a day she had 17 children signed up. Yuna set up a basic medical clinic in the barn and started treating minor injuries and illnesses for people in the area. Frontier worlds were always short on medical care. Word spread quickly. Hayori analyzed the local market and found buyers for their crops at prices Taman had never imagined. She negotiated contracts that would bring in steady income for months. Taman watched all of this happen and felt something he had not felt in years. Pride. Not just in what they were accomplishing, but in being part of something bigger than himself. On the 4th day, Taman's neighbor Donghae visited. He was a rancher who lived 40 kilometers away, one of the few people Taman occasionally talked to. Donghae was a gruff man in his 50s who believed in hard work and minding his own business. "Heard you got some aliens working for you," Donghae said, not meeting Taman's eyes. "I do," Taman replied carefully. "Government gonna come after you for that?" "Probably." Donghae was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a data pad and showed Taman a photograph. It was a family of 4 aliens, different species from the Valerians. "These are the Krell," Donghae said. "Found them 3 months ago. They were starving. I gave them work. The wife is the best mechanic I ever met. The husband knows animal medicine better than any vet on this planet. Their kids help with the harvest." Taman stared at his neighbor in surprise. "You are hiding refugees too?" "About 30 of us are," Donghae said. "All across the frontier. We got a network. We look out for each other. When the government comes, we stand together." He looked Taman in the eye. "If you need witnesses at your hearing, you got them." Taman felt a weight lift from his chest. He was not alone in this fight. The hearing was scheduled for the 6th day. Taman had to present his case to Regional Governor Quan and 2 immigration officials. They would decide if the Valerians could stay or if they would be sent to the processing center. The night before, Taman could not sleep. He reviewed his documents over and over: contracts, financial projections, letters from settlers praising the Valerians' work. It looked good on paper, but would it be enough? Yunji found him on the porch at midnight. "You are afraid," she said softly. "Yes," Taman admitted. "We are also afraid, but we are grateful. No one has fought for us before. No one has cared if we lived or died." She sat beside him. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you gave us something precious. You gave us hope." The hearing took place in the settlement's administrative building. It was a small room with bad lighting and uncomfortable chairs. Governor Quan was a serious woman in her 60s who looked like she had heard every excuse in the book. Taman presented his case. He showed the before and after production numbers for his ranch. He presented Bora's teaching credentials and the list of children she was tutoring. He showed Yuna's medical license from her homeworld and letters from settlers she had treated. He explained the cooperative structure and how it benefited the entire community. The immigration officials were skeptical. They asked hard questions. How could he guarantee the Valerians would not leave for better opportunities? How could he prove they were not displacing human workers? How could they trust that this was not just a scheme to avoid refugee protocols? Then Donghae stood up. He was sitting in the back of the room with 15 other ranchers. "Governor Quan," Donghae said, "I also employ refugee workers. So do most of the people in this room. These frontier worlds would collapse without them. We do not have enough human workers. We need skilled labor, and these refugees provide it. If you deport Taman's workers, you will have to deport all of ours too." One by one, the other ranchers stood. They each testified about the refugees they employed. A shopkeeper talked about the alien family who made furniture better than anything imported from Earth. A doctor praised a refugee nurse who worked for free. A teacher supported Bora's education program. Governor Quan listened to all of it. Her expression never changed. "This is highly irregular," she said finally. "You are asking me to approve what amounts to a completely new system of refugee integration." "We are asking you to see what works," Taman said. "These people are not a burden. They are an asset. They want to contribute. Let them." The room fell silent. Governor Quan looked at her data pad, then at the crowd of settlers, then at Taman. "I will need time to consider this," she said. "The hearing is adjourned. I will have a decision in 3 days." 3 days felt like 3 years. The first 3 days were awkward. The Valerian women stayed in the barn and tried to be invisible. Taman would bring them food 3 times a day, and they would thank him with such formality that it made him uncomfortable. They called him honored benefactor and bowed deeply whenever he appeared. On the 4th morning, Taman discovered they had been eating only half the food he brought. They were saving the rest probably for when they had to leave. When he found their small emergency ration packs nearly empty, he realized they had been supplementing his food with their own scraps to avoid being a burden. That made him angry. Not at them, but at the situation. At the war that had made them so desperate. At himself for not noticing sooner. He marched to the barn that afternoon and found them quietly mending their torn clothes. "Tonight you eat in the house," he said firmly. "All of you." No arguments, someone started to protest. "We could not possibly. My wife would be ashamed of me if I let guests eat in the barn while my table sits empty," Taman interrupted. "You dishonor her memory by refusing. That settled it." The Valerians understood honor and respect for the dead. That evening, all 11 of them crowded into Taman's small dining room. The table was not big enough, so some sat on the floor. They were uncomfortable, clearly out of their element, but they came. Taman had made a simple dinner of roasted vegetables and bread. As they ate, he asked them about themselves. Slowly, with the help of a small translation device that one of them named Nari managed to repair, they began to tell their stories. Someone had been an agricultural scientist on the Valerian homeworld. She had studied soil and crops for 30 years. Her husband and 2 sons had died when the orbital bombardment started. She escaped only because she was in an underground lab at the time. Yuna was a medic. She had worked in emergency medicine and lost her entire family, including her husband and 4 children. Her hands shook when she spoke about it. Hana was an engineer. Bora had been a teacher. Minji studied plants. Suji was a professional chef. Gina was an artist. The youngest, Dasom, was only a student when the war destroyed her world. Each of them had lost everyone they loved. As they shared their pain, Taemin felt something crack inside his chest. The wall he had built around his heart for 15 years had a fracture in it. These women understood his loss in a way no one else on New Terra could. They knew what it was like to wake up and remember that everyone you loved was gone. "I lost my wife Hyejin and my daughter Nari to a plague," Taemin said quietly. He had not said their names out loud in years. Nari was only 16. She wanted to be a doctor. Hyejin grew the most beautiful garden you ever saw. The room was silent except for the wind outside. Then Yunji, one of the older Valerians who had been a counselor, reached across the table and placed her hand on his. Her skin was warm and her bioluminescent markings glowed softly in sympathy. "They would be proud of you," Yunji said, "for helping us." After that night, things changed. The Valerians were still polite but less formal. They began to smile occasionally. Dasom, the youngest, even laughed when Taemin's old dog tried to steal food from the table. The next morning, Taemin found Somin examining his struggling crop fields. He had been having trouble growing anything for the past 2 seasons. The soil was too acidic or too dry or something. He was a rancher, not a farmer, and he was failing at it. "Your soil has potential," Somin said, kneeling to examine the red earth. "But you need different crops. Earth plants are not meant for this world." "May I try something?" Taemin shrugged. "Cannot make it worse." Within 2 days, Somin and Minji had redesigned his entire field system. They used techniques from their homeworld, combined with some of Taemin's earth seeds, and created hybrid planting beds. They worked from dawn until dusk, and their enthusiasm was contagious. Hana noticed that Taemin's water pump kept breaking. He had been manually carrying water to his thorn beasts every day because he could not afford a new pump. She disappeared into his workshop and emerged, 6 hours later with the pump completely rebuilt. Using spare parts she found around the ranch. "It will last another 10 years. Now," she said proudly. Suji took over the cooking, much to Taemin's relief. He had been eating the same 5 meals for 15 years. She combined human ingredients with Valerian spices and created dishes that made his small kitchen smell alive again. Gina asked if she could paint a mural on the barn wall. Taemin said yes, and she created a beautiful scene showing a human and a Valerian standing together under 2 different colored suns. It made everyone who saw it stop and stare. Bora started teaching Dasom advanced mathematics in the evenings, trying to keep the girls' education going. When Taemin mentioned that the nearest settlement had children who needed tutoring, Bora's eyes lit up. But it was Yuna who made the biggest difference to Taemin personally. She noticed him wincing when he bent over and asked if his back hurt. When he admitted it had been bothering him for years, she offered to help. "Valerian healing techniques are different from human medicine," she explained. "But pain is universal. May I try?" Taemin was skeptical but desperate. The pain had been getting worse. Yuna placed her hands on his lower back and her bioluminescent markings began to glow brighter. A warm sensation spread through his spine, and for the first time in 5 years the constant ache disappeared. "How did you do that?" Taemin asked in amazement. "Our bodies produce a mild electromagnetic field," Yuna explained. "It can reduce inflammation and promote healing. It is not magic, just biology." For the first time in 15 years, Taemin slept through the entire night, without back pain waking him up. As the days passed, the ranch began to transform. The fields turned green with new growth. The equipment ran smoothly. The house smelled like good food. There was laughter in the evenings. Taemin found himself looking forward to each day instead of just enduring it. But on the 7th day, a government vehicle appeared on the horizon. Taemin was in the field with Somin when he saw it. His stomach dropped. They both knew what it meant. The authorities had tracked the crash. They were here for the Valerians. "Get everyone inside the house," Taemin said quietly. "Let me handle this." 2 officials stepped out of the vehicle. They were polite but firm. They had detected an unauthorized landing. They needed to inspect the property. Refugee protocols required all unregistered aliens to report to processing centers within 7 days of arrival. "I am aware of the protocols," Taemin said calmly. "Then you understand we need to take custody of any refugees on your property," the taller official said. "These are not refugees," Taemin replied. "They are my employees. Agricultural workers? I have the right to hire labor for my ranch. The officials looked skeptical. Sir, we need to see documentation. Work permits, contracts. I will have the paperwork filed by tomorrow, Taman said. He was making this up as he went along, but he kept his voice steady. You have 1 week to comply, the shorter official said. If these aliens are not properly registered as workers, they will be transferred to a processing center. Do you understand? I understand. After the officials left, Taman went inside. The 11 Valerians were sitting in his living room, pale and frightened. They knew what processing centers were like. Overcrowded, dangerous, hopeless. We will turn ourselves in, Soman said quietly. We will not let you break the law for us. Taman sat down heavily in his chair. His back was starting to hurt again, the stress bringing back the pain. Give me a few days, he said. Let me see what I can do. That night, Taman barely slept. He had 1 week to figure out how to keep 11 illegal aliens on his property legally. He had no idea how to do it. But for the first time in 15 years, he had something worth fighting for. The sun was setting over the red hills when Taman heard the explosion. He was fixing the fence near his north pasture, the same fence he had been meaning to repair for 3 weeks now. At 73 years old, everything took a little longer than it used to. His back ached, his hands were not as steady, and sometimes he forgot why he walked into a room. But the ranch was his, and he would maintain it until his last breath. The sound came from the sky like thunder, but the sky was clear. Taman looked up and saw something burning as it fell. It was not a meteor. The object was trying to slow down, firing blue flames from its bottom. It crashed somewhere beyond the hill where his thorn beast grazed. Taman stood still for a moment. In 15 years of living alone, nothing like this had ever happened. The frontier world of New Terra was quiet. That was why he liked it. No neighbors close enough to bother him. No one to ask how he was doing or to look at him with pity when they remembered his wife and daughter were gone. He should call the authorities. That was the smart thing to do. But Taman had learned that authorities on frontier worlds moved slowly. By the time they arrived, whoever was in that crashed ship might be dead. He grabbed his old rifle, not because he wanted to shoot anyone, but because wild animals came out at night. Then he climbed into his truck and drove toward the smoke. The crash site was worse than he expected. The escape pod had torn through the earth and knocked over 2 trees. It was small, meant for short distances, and the metal was still hot. Taman approached carefully. The door was already open. They came out one by one, stumbling and weak. 11 of them. They were not human, but they were close enough that Taman's heart recognized the universal language of fear and exhaustion. They had silver-tinted skin that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. Their eyes were large and dark, and their bodies were thin, too thin. They wore torn clothes that might have been nice once. The first one to see him stopped. She raised her hands to show she was not armed. The others huddled behind her. They were all female, Taman could tell, though he did not know their species. Please, the first one said in broken human language. We mean no harm. We need only rest. 1 night. Then we go. Taman lowered his rifle. These were not soldiers or criminals. These were refugees. He had seen enough news broadcasts to know that a war was happening somewhere in the galaxy. He just never thought it would come to his ranch. You're hurt, Taman said, noticing the blood on several of them. We will manage, the spokeswoman said. We do not wish to burden you. Please, 1 night only. Taman looked at the escape pod. It would never fly again. He looked at the 11 women shivering in the cold evening air of New Terra. He thought about what his wife Hyejin would say if she were here. She would already be bringing out blankets and making food. She would never turn away someone in need. The barn is warm, Taman said. I have medical supplies in the house. Come. The women looked at each other in shock. The spokeswoman's eyes filled with tears. You would help us? You do not know us. I know you're cold and hurt, Taman said. That's enough. Follow me. The walk back to the ranch was slow. 2 of the women could barely walk and had to be supported by the others. Taman kept his distance but watched to make sure none of them collapsed. When they reached the barn, he turned on the lights and showed them the clean hay storage area. There are blankets in that chest, he said, pointing. I will bring food and medical supplies. You are very kind, the spokeswoman said. I am Soman. We are Valerian. We will cause you no trouble. Taman nodded and left. In his house, he gathered everything he could find. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medicine. He made a large pot of stew with vegetables and meat from his storage. It was simple food, but it was hot and filling. He loaded everything into a box and carried it back to the barn. The Valerians had arranged themselves in a circle. They were talking quietly in their own language, which sounded like wind chimes. When Taman entered, they went silent. "Eat first," he said, setting down the pot. "Then tend to your wounds." He turned to leave, but Soman stopped him. "Why do you help us?" Most humans would call the authorities. "We are illegal refugees." Taman paused at the door. He did not look at them when he answered. "My wife and daughter died 15 years ago. Plague took them both in the same week. I could not save them. I could not help them." He gripped the door frame. "If I can help you, then maybe their deaths meant something. Maybe I'm not completely useless." He left before they could respond. Back in his house, Taman sat in his chair and looked at the photograph on the wall. Hijin and Nari smiled at him from a happier time. He had not spoken about them to anyone in years. That night, Taman could not sleep. He kept thinking about the 11 women in his barn. Tomorrow he would have to decide what to do. The law said he should report them, but the law did not know what it was like to lose everything and need help from a stranger. In the morning, Taman woke early as always. He made coffee and looked out his window toward the barn. Smoke was rising from the chimney. That was good. They had figured out the wood stove. He cooked extra breakfast, eggs and bread, and brought it to them. When he opened the barn door, he found it spotlessly clean. They had organized everything, swept the floor, and even repaired a broken shelf he had been ignoring for months. The women were awake and sitting together. They looked better than last night, though still exhausted. "You did not have to clean," Taman said. "You gave us shelter," Soman replied. "It is the least we can do." Taman set down the food. As they ate, he studied them properly for the first time. They ranged in age, he guessed, from maybe 20 to 50 in human years. Each one had the same haunted look in their eyes. They had seen terrible things. "The authorities will come eventually," Taman said. "Someone will have detected the crash. You have maybe a week before they track it here." Soman nodded. "We understand. We will leave today. You have done more than enough." "Where will you go?" Taman asked. Soman had no answer. None of them did. They were refugees on a planet they did not know, with no resources and no plan. They would be caught in days and sent to processing centers. Taman had heard about those places. Overcrowded, cold, dangerous. He thought about his empty house. He thought about 15 years of loneliness. He thought about what Hyejin would do. "Stay," Taman said, "at least until you are stronger. We will figure something out." And that was how 11 alien widows came to live on Taman's ranch.